In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, when will machines take over the world?
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I'm your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we'll be exploring when will the machines take over the world. With me to do that is Jeff Mann, a pioneer in information security, an NSA crypto analyst, and a penetration tester before it was cool. He's also a familiar voice from Security Weekly, and Paul's Security Weekly, and Security and Compliance Weekly, and the Tribe of Hackers series. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EIS. Feedback for the show, timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That's what helps grow the show, so would really appreciate that. ShowMeCon date. So this is a ShowMeCon episode. Jeff Mann will be there talking about AI and other things. We get into a little bit of everything in this one, including PCI, which is what he spoke about last year, but he's doing AI, I think, this year. Conference dates are June 9th and 10th. Training is June 6th through 8th. There is two varieties of training, 3-day and 1-day. The 1-day is API pen testing and web app pen testing. And then training 3 days is forensics, intrusion detection, mastering InfoSec, and hands-on hacking. So definitely check that out. At this point, budgets should be in for your companies. So I would absolutely go hit your boss up about seeing if you can go to ShowMeCon. It's a really great event. And if you want to get $50 off, use Exploring Sec. That's off either the ticket or the training. And then hit me up when you get there. Let me know what you listened and what you thought of this show. And we've got 2 more, so I'm going to release 2 more next week. And then I'm going to probably take the week off of ShowMeCon. I might re-release, or I might just count one of the other 2 episodes I have ready to go for ShowMeCon, and then just kind of take a week off because I will be at ShowMeCon. I will be recording a lot of stuff there as well too. So right after that, I've been re-releasing some of my older episodes, and that's intentionally because back when I released them, I didn't have analytics, so it's nice to get some analytic on some of the older episodes. And those older episodes, a lot of how I focus this stuff or kind of frame it is around it being timeless, so it's not timely, so you can go back and listen to some of these old shows and really get a lot of value still out of them. So that's why I re-release some of that stuff, just kind of see what interest is, what people are listening to, yada yada. So this is another great one with Jeff Mann. Always have a really great time talking to him and all the ShowMeCon guests when they come on the show. I really don't need a whole lot of introductions because I think a lot of people who have really studied and understand some of the people in the InfoSec community, Jeff Mann is one of the bigger names within there. He's been around for a really long time. And as always, he's got a very thoughtful and insightful ideas and thoughts into some of the things going on, and you can hear us talk about RSA and AI and the kind of the machines taking over, and a little bit of old man yelling at the cloud as well too. So with that, we kind of start off with getting into RSA. How was RSA?
I had a great time. It was bigger than better than ever before. They said 44,000. I don't know if that was paid attendees or attendees, because there's a lot of the vendors and all the other sundry people that show up like I do. I'm there technically with a media pass every year, but I saw a lot of old friends that I see once or twice a year, and got caught up with a bunch of stuff. Did a bunch of streaming interviews of mostly founders of companies through my work with podcasts. My day job company was out there, so I made sure I spent time with them. We hosted a couple networking events. We don't do a booth because it's a waste of money, but we host networking events like lunchtime, happy hour, and have people come to us. That much more quality contact. and did my fair amount of the networking events. But I'm pretty picky and choosy these days.
You have to be.
Yeah, well, absolutely, you have to be, because everybody's got them. More and more companies are figuring out to set up operations off-site and have people come to them. But somebody was saying they heard that at least one of the booths, not sure what vendor it was, dropped $1 million for the booth, for the extravagant booth itself that they put in place.
Oh, wow.
Not just the cost of the space, but somebody had goats that you could pet. Somebody had puppies that you could pet. So, I mean, there was the usual, oh my God, this is a shit show. Why do we do it every year?
I know people that won't go anymore. Like, they're just like, it's San Francisco. It's smelly. It's expensive.
Right. It's definitely expensive. I personally like San Francisco. I think it's a fun town. The first couple of years I went out there, I was working for Tenable, and I would have, like an hour and a half booth duty every day, and the rest of the time was mine. So I spent a lot of time touring the city and going around different places. So most people's objections are they don't like seeing homeless people and having to be near them, and quite a few homeless people are also people with mental challenges. So I can understand how you can be a little bit unnerved by that. It doesn't faze me, but I can understand how it would upset other people.
Yep. No, I've been to Detroit, and there's the Seattle's another one, San Diego. They've got them all over the place, unfortunately. So, do you think RSA is bigger than DEF CON at this point? Isn't DEF CON like, I can't remember what the last numbers were, but 44,000. Like, if you don't know, DEF CON's there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in a DEF CON range. I have to think that includes all the, let's say, infrastructure. I mean, 550 or 600 vendors, and probably each of them are bringing probably 10 people on average. So, that's 5,000 or 6,000 people right there. I'm sure they're very liberal in how they come up with the attendance numbers, but it definitely was a lot of people there. It seemed like it was full tilt. There's so much to do, not just the vendor floor. They've got tons of tracks, speaker tracks, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, there was just from my interviewing people, it was fun to interview founders because, they wouldn't start the company if they didn't believe strongly about something. So letting their passion and enthusiasm come through is a whole lot more fun interview than just, talking to the chief product manager, marketing manager that's been at the job for a year, and he's just sort of reading from the script and very dry. Most of my interviews were pretty engaging, and the time went quickly. 15-minute interviews doesn't seem like a lot of time, but if you're really bored and the guy's really person is really struggling, it can be like an eternity.
Yeah. No, 15 minutes flies by pretty quick, especially when it's an engaging conversation. Were these founders like newer companies or people that have been around, or a mix?
It was kind of a mix. Definitely, I would say most of them were newer companies, not necessarily startups, but one guy, very, very confident young man of 34, advertises that his company is the fastest growing data security company in history. And I'm like, you're not going to get away from an interview with me without, explaining that one. Yeah.
Yep.
But he's Israeli X, whatever the group was that all the people came through, the NSA equivalent or CIA equivalent over in Israel. A lot of Israeli companies these days.
Yeah, I feel like there's been like an uptick of that just over the last, I guess, few years. 3, 4, 5 years. It was, I don't know what it's been since COVID, so it was probably 22, where there was like a whole contingency over with like Israeli government sort of sponsoring an area, coming to see all of our vendors type of thing. But they're definitely out there. It's not like the old days when the only Israeli shop was Checkpoint, and if you worked for the government, you weren't allowed to use foreign
technology in your environments, and they had to figure that one out. It took a couple of years, but
Yeah.
and there were some of them referenced sort of the legacy that Checkpoint left behind, or the model, I guess. But I don't know. I had fun. It was a long week. It was a very busy week. I was going back and forth between lots of different venues and places, and but it made the week go quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most I paid for it all during the week was a cup of coffee in the morning, because I wanted a decent cup of coffee. But meals were provided, refreshments and libations were provided. I hit 2 cigar parties during the week. We sort of resurrected on Sunday night. It was a tradition to have sort of a hacker meetup for those hackers that had to come to town and do the corporate thing. So we sort of what's the word that they use in the movies? The rebranded it, rebooted. That's the word I'm trying to
Rebooted. Yep.
We kind of rebooted it. It used to be at a tiki bar, and this time around it was at an Irish pub. So.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of the people that would ordinarily come to it showed up, and so it was fun to see old friends that way. It's always weird because you see people Sunday night and you're like, yeah, I'll see you later on in the week, and then I never see them again. So
That seems like a big one where, like, I remember doing that at DEF CON. It's like, oh, I'll see this person, or even there's some of the small ones. It's like, I'll catch up with them later, and they just never see them again. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then, of course, I'm reading posts from all sorts of people about their experience at RSA. It's like, oh, you were there? I didn't run into you. So there's just, I think part of it is I spent a lot of time in Moscone West because that's where Broadcast Alley is. It's where the keynotes are. But, the vendor expo and a lot of the tracks and special villages, like the startup villages, whatever they call it, that's all happening in Moscone South, and I hardly ever went over to Moscone South, especially on the upper floor. So you can't be everywhere, you can't do everything.
You say you probably want a good pair of shoes if you're having to walk around quite a bit, right?
Absolutely.
You can get your steps in while you're there.
Yeah. Well, I'm old. I don't get my steps. I walk miles, and I walked many miles every day.
Yeah.
I was sort of regretting that I didn't install an app that would have counted steps, but I have a rough idea of. Most of the places I was going to were a half mile apart. The cigar parties were at the same venue. I know that's a mile away from my hotel, and I walked there and walked back most of the time. So, I've been walking for years, so I have a pretty good internal clock or odometer. Is that what it is? It measures distance.
Yeah, sure.
You walk 12,000 steps. I'm like, what does that mean? I have to translate into miles. I'm like, let's see. If I walk 12,000 steps, that would probably be probably 2 miles, I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah, I've never calculated it. I've never converted my steps to like actual
right.
miles.
And I'm old school enough that it's just a foreign language. I don't know what steps mean. In terms, it's like Celsius and Fahrenheit. There's probably an app. I could probably go to Google. How many steps does this app say is a mile?
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be how many steps.
Yep.
But anyway, it was fun, and now it's back to the grind of doing the day job for the next month or 2 or 3 until it's time to go out to Vegas. Although I'm speaking at 2 different conferences in June, so I will be on the road a little bit in June.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to 3 conferences in June. I'm not speaking at one of them, but it's conveniently in the town of one of my daughters, so I'll get to hang out with my granddaughter and go to a conference. So,
yep, and ShowMeCon's one of those. That's why we're kind of here. Let's talk about what you're going to do at ShowMeCon.
Yes, we're supposed to be doing something like recording something, aren't we?
Yeah. What's the AI talk on then?
Well, the AI talk is, just kind of, and of course, I have a week's experience at RSA this past week to sort of help massage the talk, but mostly it's based on a couple years ago. Security Weekly sent me out to the big IBM user conference, and back then it was all about meeting Watson and the machines are going to take over the world. And I'd written an article just kind of walking through the science fiction approach to the machines are going to take over the world, and how it's a pretty old theme, and there's lots of different movies that sort of address that topic. So it's kind of a embellishment of that. There's sort of the idea that, of course, now it's all AI. It used to be the machines becoming sentient. Now it's the software that's becoming sentient. And I just want to kind of sort of do a little bit of a history of, this is not a new theme, and it could end badly or it could end well. The most common example is like Star Trek Next Generation. The smart machine was Data, and he was benign and wanted to help humans. You've got the iRobot kind of thing where, the machines want to eliminate the plague that is humanity from the earth, and then the earth will be fine. And there's a couple variations in between. So part of the talk is just kind of walking through a sort of a history of the science fiction ideas of the machines taking over. And then, after last week, where I've had more serious discussions with people that are doing serious stuff with AI or MLM, I'll probably get, as far as I'm concerned, it's all a bunch of hype and it's a bunch of buzzwords. Literally every company that out at RSA last week had AI something to say. And the vast majority of them, it was just, oh yeah, AI is in there. We do everything AI. But there was a few companies that are like, no, we actually take this serious, and it's and this will tie into science fiction themes, because I was talking to one guy and I said, well, so is it a black obelisk moment, like from 2001? And he's like, not quite, but it's close. It's more like invention of the steam engine. He and the guy I was talking to expects AI to really, really change things. But I'm sort of old school, back to the Cold War, where, cat and mouse, we got a new magic weapon that's going to win the war, and we're fine for a while, but then the other side comes up with something even bigger and badder, and so the scales tip their way. So, when you live through 5 decades of that kind of thing, what's another buzzword and another hype cycle? So some sort of balance between it's a hype cycle and, there might be something to it, but here's how to objectively approach looking at new technology and capabilities like AI from a grumpy old man's perspective, who just as soon never touch it and never use it and retire and go sit on my porch and smoke a cigar all day.
Yeah, it's gotten interesting. I mean, like, to your point, I like the steam engine reference, because it does seem like it's allowing people. I would say it's almost similar to when mobile phones became more popular and became more useful, right? Is that it kind of changed the game a bit. I can see AI doing that, but I'm also like you. I'm at the point in my career where it's like, I don't want to go study this. I really right. I need to be aware of it. I use it for the podcast. I find use for it in like creating certain things, but like as far as diving into some of like the security around it and some of the other stuff, I'm kind of like a wait and see. And I don't know. I feel like I should be doing more with AI for the podcast, because I haven't really touched a whole lot of AI, but that's because I feel like it's still kind of new and we're still trying to figure it out.
Well, and I'm touching as little as possible, which means I'm fighting with my phone all the time, because it keeps wanting me to, sign on and let's get started. And I mean, just about everything these days that I use has got, hey, let AI enhance your experience. But AI in that context is doing the exact things that, no, I'd much rather do it myself. Thank you. Because I think I speak better than you, and I think I can describe something better than you. Where I see the benefit is, just the fact that you can throw a whole bunch of data at something and it can sort it and find the stuff a lot more quickly. But that's what we used to have Google for, but or other predecessors to Google.
But even Google's using it now. Like that's my
Right.
first preview now is like, here's an AI preview of what you're looking for as far as the answer, which I will say is useful because then I don't have to click into another link, right? I'm still just
but I disable it because I don't like Google telling me what to do or what to think or where to go.
Yeah.
But even before AI came along, the fact that you could do a Google search on a term and I could do a Google search on a term and we get different results, that's scary enough as it is. That the algorithms are trying to give you the customized experience, and of course I'm fighting all the technology, the streaming services. How did you like that movie? We want to customize your recommendation list, and I'm like, I don't want you telling me what to watch in the first place. So just go away. I gave a talk last year. Well, the talk that I gave at ShowMeCon last year. That was sort of the history between 1996 and 2004, and I used the slide deck from 1998. I gave that talk earlier this year at a security conference that was put on by universities, and I realized, shoot, I'm going to be talking to college kids. They're not going to get all my references to stuff that happened before they were born. And I was thinking about, how do I need to approach this? I said, well, I should start with, when I first got on the internet, literally every machine on the internet was connected by a wire, every system. And then I thought, is that true? Is that really true? Because I wasn't thinking of an exception. So I went to Google on my phone and I didn't disable the Google Assist. And I said, was every machine connected to the internet by wire back in the 90s or something like that? And it came back and said, no. In the early days of the internet, most systems were connected to the internet over a phone line. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you, but a phone line is actually a wire. And I didn't want to set it straight so it could get smarter. And I'm like, okay, you're stupid.
Well, there is this concept, right, that people have worried about the AI taking over, but the AI is really just a reflection of what we put into it. Right. And as a people, we're really kind of dumb, and so we've really dumbed down AI. And I feel like after using ChatGPT for the last couple of years, I do feel like it's gotten a little bit dumber each time. Like it slowly has progressed from it was giving me really great outputs to now it's like. I see it as like an assistant that I've hired to help me with writing some of the show notes, something like that. But now I feel like I constantly have to be on top of the assistant because even when you can tell it, hey, do this thing for me, the next time it does it the exact way I told it not to do it. I'm like, I just feel like I'm working with a person that is degressed as far as, work wise, right? They were really kick ass and then they kind of just have fallen off.
Well, and, like I said, I like to do the stuff that most people are using AI for. I would much rather do it myself. And people have been talking about, it's about 80% accurate. And when I gave that answer on the internet, I'm like, no, it's 100% accurate based on the information that it's been fed. We're the ones that are only 80% accurate, the sources of information. So semantics, but grumble, AI.
Well, I'm with you, man. I use it for what it is, but what are some of the real risks you do see from AI?
Well, I don't think I've come up with anything other than what other people are saying. It can write a lot better phishing email these days in in the broken English that we're used to, not somebody that English isn't their native language form of English that most of us can detect. The ability for people to use it to write malware and write code, but code can be used against you, some malware. Those are the big ones. I haven't really given it that much thought. That's mostly what I'm hearing people talking about. But I guess my attitude is more, it's like any other technology. It's like any other tool. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. So all the people that are running around saying, "Oh, bad things could happen if you're not up to speed on AI," I'm like, it'll kind of balance itself out. That's how it usually does. I guess the other thing is that introducing generative AI systems, nodes, whatever you call them, into your environment where it's yet another piece of technology that probably has to be hardened in some way and locked down in some way. The fact that you could feed it misinformation so that it's producing bad results, especially in like a healthcare. You want to assassinate somebody, feed the GPT that's collecting all the healthcare data on this person or the demographic that person is part of, and shift it towards letting the engine tell you to give them the wrong dosage of something or the wrong medication altogether. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I mean that potential to abuse it. The guy that I was talking to that was most excited about it, he's working for a company that's actually trying to harness it for the greater good of humanity, and to do that, they're trying to understand how it works. They're trying to really unlock it and not have it be this nebulous thing that's out there doing magical stuff. They're digging into it and trying to really understand the mechanics of it. And so they love things like what's the term they use for when the AI just kind of runs amok and gives crazy answers? Hallucinations. Yeah. They're like, we love that because that helps us, that gives us another data point to figure out, because it's not hallucinating, it's logically getting there from somewhere, and they're trying to figure it all out. And the guy was really excited about it. I'm like, knock yourself out on that. I'm not really that interested in it, but he was. The last time I did the podcast, Paul Asadorian was like, okay, life goal, we got to get Jeff to use ChatGPT or AI in general. And like,
that's a challenge.
You keep trying that. It is what it is.
Yeah, well, I think there's something to the fact of still understanding what the AI is giving you, right? Like, and I think that's one of the risks too that people talk about is, you get some output. You need to understand what that output actually means. Otherwise, you're just taking it and using it, and it might be entirely wrong.
But it's coming from the immutable source. AI. Yeah. AI is the absolute authority because it has all the information that's going to give you the right result. Yeah, I don't buy that. But it goes back to the whole premise of war games. The beginning of war games, you got the two guys in the missile silo, and they get the command to launch, and one guy hesitates because he's like, how do we know this is real? I mean, and even if it is real, do we want to be responsible for killing millions of people? And so enter the computer, because the computer's not going to let emotion get in the way of making the decision. I kind of like emotion. I kind of like the imprecise, dirty, yucky, messy human existence that's imperfect, but it's imperfect that we're accustomed to, and we're comfortable with influencing, and we're comfortable with its limitations and its potential. A lot of people were riding around in Waymos this year for the first time. I took my first Waymo ride, and a bunch of my friends did, and everybody's coming back and telling their stories about riding in Waymo. And I was not comfortable with it, but I was comfortable in the sense that I didn't think anything bad was going to happen. It was just weird, and just sitting in the back seat of a car that's, driving around and there's nobody behind it. It's weird, but I was also like, but the program is such that it's going to be very conservative. And I was like walking around the city streets, doing all the walking. I was coming up to an intersection, and I saw a car coming. I was like, oh, can I make it? Because the counter was counting down, and I said, oh, it's a Waymo. It's going to stop for me. I could, whether the sign was for me or against me, if I step in front of a Waymo, it's going to stop for me, which isn't necessarily the case if it's a human. So, I was already gaming the system in that sense. But I don't know.
Yeah, Waymo is the self-driving cars, and I guess are they like taxi cabs? Because I've never heard of them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Waymos are self-driving cars, and they're in San Francisco and in Phoenix. And I spent the weekend in Phoenix. That's where I took my Waymo ride, my first Waymo ride. So they kind of look like and I'm suspecting it's similar technology, but the cars that drive around and do the Google Maps and all the photos of, big, huge thing on the top that's spinning around real fast. And they got like 9 cameras placed around the car. And it's similar to if you've ever ridden into a Tesla, there's a tablet that's showing, in real time, all the traffic, all the pedestrians, all the intersections. It's all right there. So it's seeing everything. and you can watch it seeing everything. It's not quite as detailed as on a Tesla. You've ridden on one of those, but similar technology. So it's seeing everything, and it's programmed to respond accordingly, and it's gonna defer. I was visiting my sister-in-law and my niece, and they were saying that they'd had some family over recently, and several Waymos were ordered, and two showed up at the same time in the parking lot to pick people up, and the Waymos were they got what looked to be confused because they're designed to defer to the other cars, but they were deferring to each other. So they took video of these two cars just going back. Who's going to defer? Nobody was going to like, okay, I'll go, which is what a human would do. Okay, I'll just go. They kept so that there's like 2 minutes of these cars just going back and forth trying to figure out who's going to go first. I'm sure that's a programming thing that they can figure out. But yeah, it's if you Google it, that you'll see pictures of it. They're all white. They're Jaguars. So they're beautiful cars. They were immaculately clean on the inside and quiet, and a very smooth ride. And they're not peeling out. They're not taking chances, dodging pedestrians and weaving through traffic. They just plod along. It was funny because my sister-in-law and my niece, when we took the ride in the Waymo, they kept talking to us like, oh, that was a good turn. Oh, that was a good merge. Oh, you really handled that intersection well. I'm like, why are you talking to it? I'm like, I don't know. We're trying to encourage it. I'm like, there's no it there. But it was just humorous.
So when you hop in, does it voice activate? You tell it where you want to go, or do you already have it?
No, you program it like an Uber. You give it a destination and a pickup point, and it actually finds you based on GPS coordinates, which can be a little bit tricky. Like if you're in the back of a restaurant and you order it and go out to the front of the restaurant, which is what happened in San Francisco, it's trying to pick you up in the back alley or on the side street that's closest to where you ordered it. But it's just like ordering an Uber or Lyft. It has an app, and it has on the big spinny thing, it'll show your initials, so it's your Waymo. And there's a voice that's recorded that's, welcome to Waymo. We hope you have a pleasant experience. The doors pop open, you get inside. And then on the tablet, it's waiting for you to buckle up. And then on the tablet, it says, press here when ready to go. You press it and you're on your way.
That's cool. Was it any cheaper? Was it cheaper than it, or is it more expensive? Or
it was comparable, but you don't have to tip it. So in that sense, it was a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, I'm already just thinking about how things can go wrong, especially like in a downtown setting where someone is too sick, gets in and pukes all over the car, and then it drops off that person, and then it goes off and picks up the next person, and you open the door and there's puke just sitting there.
Well, yeah, my sister-in-law was like, well, what if they pick up a drunk and they puke all over the back seat? And I'm like, and I'm pointing to the little camera up, in between the front seats where like the rear view mirror is. I'm like, pretty sure that's a camera. I'm pretty sure, they're watching us the whole time. So they would see if something like that happened. But, I could, my reptile brain's like, yeah, I wonder, I'm sure somebody's already picked up a Waymo and, tried to do it in the back seat type of thing. And so there's probably porn videos going around Waymo headquarters of all the people that have done it in the back seat.
Well, I mean,
like they do it in the backs of cabs.
Did you have to sign any sort of terms of service? I guess you would do it with the app, because that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the terms of service, right? Where all these companies are integrating AI into their platforms, like you said, right? You open up Word and it's like Copilot's like, let me help you write this, or us being on Google Meet. I get Gemini pop-ups all the time saying, hey, let me help you rewrite this or whatever. Right. And it's like in their terms of service, they're saying everything you put in here, we can train our stuff on. Right.
Right. And I try to disable as much as I can, as often as I can. But I know every time there's a refresh, it's popped up again. We lost that battle with Google and everybody else a long time ago. Yeah. But even like I just got a new upgrade to my home cable system. I mean, I'd had the cable boxes that we have in this house for probably 10 or 15 years. And I was just thinking, gosh, that's really old equipment. And then lo and behold, we get all this new equipment. So my cable box that used to be yay big is now little, like a Fire Stick size thing. And of course, the remote control's voice activated, and they're asking me to turn all this stuff on. And I'm like, nope. because I don't want you recording me. And they're probably still recording me. But I try to disable all that stuff as much as possible. I don't need to have a smart light bulb or a smart refrigerator or a smart air conditioner. I'm going to walk over to the wall and turn the dial.
Yep.
That's just me.
Well, I also think there's a there's a lot of this, but then I think people are going to start sticking out. Like you mentioned, writing, right? I've seen so many news articles now that it's like, oh, this is just AI generated. You can pick up on certain words that AI likes to use for cybersecurity articles, for example. And so I think people like you that are going to stay away from it and still write your own articles. That sticks out a little bit more than everyone else that's using AI to just pump out articles left and right and not really putting much effort into it.
Right. One of my earliest experiences it was probably ChatGPT. There's a buddy of mine that I'm an advisor to his company, and he sent me a policy that he said, "Oh, I wrote this policy. Can you take a look at it?" And I'm reading through it. I'm like, "Oh, this is crap. How do I tell my friend that his writing is crap?" And then he came back later and said, "Oh, so what'd you think? I had ChatGPT write it." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you for telling me that. It sucked, and I didn't know how to break it to you that it sucked." But it was wrong in several instances.
Was it just wrong? Because I feel like I've used ChatGPT to write policies quickly, but I went back and edited it, right? I didn't just get the output and then start using it. It's more like I edit it, change some words, things like that. Because I do feel like AI does a better job of explaining stuff than I'm not a writer. Like I struggle with the writing. So I feel like for me, it enhanced my writing, but I still had to go back and edit it to make sure it still sounded correct versus but I feel like the policies I wrote were much more concise and much more, I think, readable. And because I feel like I've seen the policies that are crap that were written by a human, and it's just like, this could have been simplified.
Yeah, I don't remember the details. I just knew that there was stuff that I objected to, so I call it wrong. I mean, it was probably more word choice, and although, well, and I get hung up on, especially real people, sort of conflating the terms risk, vulnerability, threat, because there's separate, distinct terms where I come from, but people sort of intersperse them as if they're synonymous. So it's probably somewhere along those lines. It was probably trying to define a vulnerability or a threat or a risk, and it probably just did a horrible job. I know that we have in my day job, we have a pen testing team, and they had a question about a finding on a pen test report, but it wasn't a PCI pen test. So they were wondering if this particular finding was something that had to be fixed right away or not. And I was jumping into a Slack conversation, reading up, because they had the conversation hours before. So I'm like, just ask me, I could give you the interpretation. But the guy that runs the practice, he put, this is what PCI says about it. And he put this big, long diatribe. And I'm like, this is flat out wrong. Where did you get this? Oh, I had ChatGPT write it. That explains it. Because, I mean, it was right. It was right-er for version 3, but we're now under version 4 of PCI. And it was just not right at all. Had versions wrong and just wrong information. And that's what I object to. Going back to, people just accept it as gospel. Well, ChatGPT wrote it. It must be good. But people that don't know that it's not good, they're not going to know that what you're saying is good or not either. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I think it does. I think, that's where some of the experts like you that understand these topics, right, can come in and provide that guidance on a lot of it. And really what I was thinking is check your sources, right? Like you can't just accept the first output. This to me is why a lot of professors and colleges would not accept Wikipedia references, right? That they wanted the actual source of where, so people had to actually go dig in. And that activity, I think, is going to be more and more important as we head into this, more and more AI age. Wrapping up, what's your favorite resource for staying up to date with cybersecurity? And this is more of a general question. Like, what do you use? What's your favorite resource from cybersecurity?
Well, that's a little bit of a trick question for me because I try to avoid the technology aspect of things as much as possible. I guess my resource for keeping up with the technology aspect is just the work I do with Paul Security Weekly, co-hosting that most every week. I'm usually on it 2 or 3 times a month because other obligations, and Paul and others certainly get wrapped around the axle on all the greatest technology and the latest vulnerabilities. We've been having an interesting discussion over the last couple months, just kind of the overall state of CVEs or lack thereof, and risk ranking based on CVSS. And of course, the last couple weeks when the MITRE was going to lose funding to even keep the CVE database going, and so on and so forth. But Paul's working for a company now that's looking for vulnerabilities in hardware, and they're discovering vulnerabilities and submitting them to vendors. In one case, the vendor just fixed it, and they never bothered to issue a CVE, and Paul was freaking out about that. And there are ramifications to that, because from where I work in the PCI world, for better or for worse, like it or not, most companies that I deal with, they jump and respond to the results of a vulnerability scanner, and the vulnerability isn't being looked for in the vulnerability scanner generally until there's a CVE. There may be some exceptions, but if something doesn't have a CVE, it's probably not getting a plugin in Nessus and probably is not being looked for in your environment. Notwithstanding the fact that that's not how you should be finding vulnerabilities in your environment in the first place, despite what the scan vendors tell you. But keeping up with the technology side of things, it's mostly with my work with Paul's Security Weekly. The rest of it, in a lot of ways, doesn't change. The security objectives, the overall goals of when I started with it was data security, and then information security, and then internet security, and then cybersecurity. But locking things down, turning off unused features, changing default settings and passwords, and so on and so forth. A lot of that stuff hasn't changed. I mean, that was a lot of the content of the talk I gave last year at Show Me Con, where I'm using a slide deck from 1998 that says, how people fail, and we're failing in the same way today, the same way we failed 30 years ago. So that aspect of it, I think is time independent. The general security objectives don't change. The technology changes. Applying the security principles to new technology, some find that fun and challenging. Others don't. Some people think, well, it's new technology, I'm sure they fixed all the old problems. But even like getting back to AI, I saw several vendors in my brief jog around the vendor floor, the expo floor at RSA last week. And I remember stopping at one booth, and I was looking over at the booth of another one. It might have been at B-Sides, I forget. But it was talking about this, that, and the other AI, and they were talking about shadow AI. And I'm like, of course that's going to be a thing these days. Who controls what's getting dropped on your corporate network, enterprise network in the first place? So why not have a whole bunch of people out there just dropping in all sorts of chat GPT agents or machines or whatever the damn things are called? I mean, if you don't have a tight control over your network in the first place, and you let people do stuff like that, what does it matter if it's an AI bot or agent versus, a generation ago, it would be a modem or a laptop that's got a modem, so that people are concerned about split tunneling or bypassing the VPN. It's the same fundamental problem. That hasn't changed, but what's being dropped in now, and the capabilities, and for good or for bad, that's changing, that's evolving. But the same problem is, get a control of your network, and have tight control over what gets added, and who can add it, and who has the privileges to add stuff. And maybe some of these problems that we're talking about won't be problems, because they should have never been problems in the first place if you just did your job.
Yeah, that's kind of my biggest thing with cybersecurity stuff is that it's like in the documentation, right? And if you're not following the documentation or not configuring properly, I absolutely agree. And I love Paul's Security Weekly. One of the first podcasts I picked up. It like you said, they do get very nerdy and technical on a lot of that stuff. So you can pick up a lot of different things around some of the technical aspects. Yeah, he's been into hardware for a long time too, and I can't imagine him testing out healthcare vendors, because I know a lot of them are just pumping out healthcare devices and they don't care about security or vulnerabilities. So yeah, and a lot of them aren't even around anymore either. So you can find a vulnerability, and that company's not going to fix it because they don't anymore. But it's still going to be running something that's needed for the hospital.
That's very true. And and especially in hardware, if you think of critical infrastructure and OT, these are environments that invest millions and tens of millions of dollars in large scale equipment, and they kind of want it to last for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, not the 12 to 18 month refresh cycle that we've more or less grown accustomed to in the IT world. I had my first official smartphone that I owned. I got it back in 2017, and it bricked on me last year. And I took it into the Verizon store, and they looked at it, and the kid was probably 19 or 20, whiz bang on whatever the latest phone he was trying to sell me. But he's looking at this thing. He's like, "How old is this?" I think it's about 7 years old. And he's like, "I've never seen a phone this old being turned in." But it worked until it didn't. And so now I have a new smartphone that I hope to keep with me until I retire. And if I get 7 years out of it, hopefully I'll be retired in 6 years, and I'll just throw the thing aside and never talk to anybody again. If you want me, I'll be in the backyard.
I love it. Anything else you want to plug?
Gosh. I'm looking forward to coming back to ShowMeCon, because it was a lot of fun last year. It's a well put together conference, well attended. One of the most impressive things last year of ShowMeCon was there was 5 different vendors there that were PCI companies, QSA companies, which is what I do for a living in my day job, which is why I wanted to give a talk on PCI, but I'm going to give a talk on AI instead. It would probably be more fun anyway. Nobody wants to hear a talk on PCI. Although the talk I was going to give was the impact that PCI has made over 20 years, and why do I talk about it so much on Paul's Security Weekly? Why do I keep coming back to it? And just try to illustrate that, it's not just some weird little checkbox thing that nobody pays attention to. It really had teeth back in the day, and it created an industry. I don't think pen testing, red teaming companies would be what they are today if it wasn't for the fact that PCI 20 years ago required companies to have a pen test done. And so there's some lessons learned there. Maybe I can weave that into an AI discussion somewhere along the way.
That or you just say you wrote it with AI, which you do or you don't, and just say, I'm like, maybe you have 2 presentations. Here's, like you were talking about, right? Where here's what AI says about PCI. Here's why it's bullshit, right?
Yeah. If I get the creative juices going, and of course I don't know where I'll get the ChatGPT source for what it says, because that would mean I did deliberately have to use it. Maybe I'll have somebody else do the searches for me.
Let me know, and I will happily. Yeah, I use it a ton, so I'll go to 3 different ones and give you 3 different outputs if you want. You tell me what you want.
Well, I'll throw it out there for you right now, and this is contextual to PCI, but I would ask each of the engines or agents or whatever you call it that you use, what is the difference between, in a cybersecurity context, what's the difference between risk, vulnerability, and threat? I'd be curious to see the various responses.
What's the difference between risk, vulnerability, and what else?
Threat. And then for giggles, you could say, what does Jeff Mann say is the difference between risk?
Ooh, I like that. What does Jeff Mann say? I'm going to do it. I'll send you the output.
Cool. Maybe I'll weave that into my AI present. I like your idea. I could do the AI talk, but then juxtapose the the message that I wanted to give on PCI. And I mostly wanted to do it at ShowMeCon because there were so many PCI companies there.
Yeah.
Which is unprecedented in the last 10, 15 years I've been going to conferences, struggling to find any vendor that knew anything about PCI other than, oh, that's some compliance thing. Yeah, we do compliance. We check the box. RSA last week, I was interviewing companies that knew what PCI was, and we were talking about specific requirements and how these vendors met these requirements. Never have had that conversation with vendors in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And specifically, even though the PCI Council will not say the word, PCI now requires an SBOM, a software bill of materials. For some reason, the council won't say that it's an SBOM requirement, but there's a requirement that calls for you to do an inventory of all the software components of all your custom and bespoke software, and demonstrators show that information is being used to discover and remediate vulnerabilities, which is essentially the definition of an SBOM. They just won't come out and say why, I don't know.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Jeff, this was a really great discussion. I feel like we covered a lot of different topics. Looking forward to seeing you at ShowMeCon, of course. But thank you for joining me.
So, and the last tease, my wife will be with me this time.
Ooh.
She's even more fun than I am because she's not grumpy. She's actually happy and energetic and loves talking to people and meeting people.
Yeah. Are you sure she's not going to just hang out at the pool or enjoy some of because that's a great venue, I think, for a conference because I'm bringing my family as well too, but you will not see them at the conference.
Well, I gotta remember to ask Dave for like a +1 pass because she likes to get in and meet the people. She's been going with me to conferences for the last year and a half, and she loves it. She went to B-Sides Charm a couple weeks ago for the second time, and she was excited to see people that she already knew, and they were excited to see her again. Kevin and Brittany from Secure Ideas. I met Brittany last year at ShowMeCon, but then we met again, and they both met my wife at B-Sides Charm. So I was just talking to Brittany earlier today. I was like, oh, by the way, my wife's coming to ShowMeCon, so she's all excited. Like, let's go to dinner. So it's kind of awesome. A whole new world for my wife, who's spent many years raising the kids and running the house and having no idea what I did for a living, but she's trying to enter my world. I'm trying to enter her world. That's one of the strategies for how do you stay married when you're empty nesters and in your recliner years. So we're finding new life in the fact that she's discovering that she really likes going to hacker conferences and meeting people and hanging out with people. Yeah.
No, and ShowMeCon's a good one, as you mentioned. I think it's just a really great venue and great people, and yeah, I have a blast there. So
cool. Well, cool. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. All right. Thank you. You have a good rest of the day.
All right. You too.